Welcome, sports fans. I'm Craig Cortello.
And I'm Kyle Cortello.
And we are
the Italian Sports Guys.
Bada boom.
Bada bing.
Take the gun.
Leave the cannolis you hate.
It's a weekly sports talk show with Italian New Orleans twist, so grab a beer or a little red vino.
Some pizza pie, some pasta marinara you hear.
Throw on your favorite sports jersey.
And join us. Why don't you?
All right, Kyle, good to be back here with the ISG Nation. Not so good to be here after a 5-win season with the New Orleans Saints, though.
Benvenuti, Craigie boy. It's better than a 4-win season.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, tough year. We want to get into the coaching search, of course. Year end, there were 3 interim coaches fired mid-year. There were 3 openings right after the season ended. One of those was filled pretty quickly with Mike Vrabel going to the Patriots. It was kind of preordained. They went through the process very quickly. But a big wild card came in a couple of days later.
Yes, it did.
Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones can't come to some kind of agreement in Dallas, so that throws a wild card and certainly puts him in the Saints mix.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, he's got history here. He was obviously pretty well documented. He was the first offensive coordinator for Jim Haslett's tenure and stayed 4 of Haslett's 5 years in that position. Last year he went out, which was the 05 Katrina year, he went out to San Francisco for a year, and then the following year was hired by Green Bay. But certainly familiar to Mickey Loomis, and Randy Mueller was the GM at the time who hired him, who hired Haslett and that staff. Well, funny how things work out in the league. Randy Mueller is part of the coaching search now. He's with the Saints again. So, Mike McCarthy, definitely a name that's familiar to the people in New Orleans and people in those building on airline as well.
Yeah, something we've had a lot of discussions about in our text thread with the guys. You know, it seems like Loomis wants to have people in the building that he's comfortable with. So those pre-existing relationships. Aaron Glenn is the other leading candidate so far, along with McCarthy. Guys who've been in the building, guys he knows. He doesn't want somebody to come in that building who's kind of an unknown, who may butt heads with once you get into the day-to-day of things. So that's really what I think. You know, you talk about. There was reports out there that that Dennis Allen, when he was fired by Loomis walked in the door, closed the door, said we had to talk. I'm not in favor of this, but you're out, man. Right. So that tells you he's really wanting to have people that he's comfortable with, and even to the extent that he wanted to keep DA on longer.
I think that's big on trust, and a lot of people are like that. They want somebody that they know, and familiarity. Sometimes it breeds contempt, but sometimes you're not starting all over from scratch.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's always bad, but in this case, I think he still believes that there are enough pieces and parts to where this isn't a complete and total blow up.
Yeah.
To where it's a situation where, look, you know what you know, right?
Yeah.
And then I think Mickey Loomis's thought process is, we're not as far off as people think. And I'm not saying that that's awful. I'm not. Look, he knows what it takes to build a winner. Now, the second time around, we did make the right call on the coach. Dennis Allen proved that. I'll say this too, not to get off a topic here. I think you had to hire Dennis Allen at that time.
Oh, yeah, right. We all agreed on that. That was the right move at the time, given the previous seasons where the success they had.
And then his third year, he goes 9-8. Who's firing a coach in this league after a winning season?
It's tough, yeah.
It's hard. Right. So now we all knew we were that close. No, we're that close to making the playoffs. We're that close to 5-12, and we proved that. Look, it's a risk and all, but this is a good way to flush a lot of that old system out. And even if it ends up being Aaron Glenn, who was there under Peyton, you're not bringing in Aaron Glenn off of Dennis Allen's staff.
Yeah, right.
You're bringing Aaron Glenn in off of Dan Campbell's staff, where he watched a guy who went to the worst franchise in the league by far at the time.
Yeah. And
in short order, built them into a Super Bowl contender. He's got to take some of that with him, too, if that's Aaron Glenn. So.
Yeah, and you look at those two guys. McCarthy, number one, we talked about the similarity between the coaching records of McCarthy, of course, with Peyton, came in right at the same time. The records are almost identical in terms of, playoff appearances, the double-digit wins and all that kind of stuff. One Super Bowl and multiple NFC Championships games, so pretty comparable. So if you like Sean Payton, you like what he's doing now, you think he's qualified, you have to really give McCarthy credit. His numbers are comparable to what Sean Payton's on.
I'll compare it for people like this. You can look for a simulation. Sean Payton, sure, Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
Okay. Aaron Glenn becoming a first-time head coach. D'Amico Ryans, Dan Campbell.
Yeah.
So if you had those 3 options out there today, Sean Payton, D'Amico Ryans, Dan Campbell, who are you picking? First of all, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So it's kind of sort of, what do you want? D'Amico Ryans and Dan Campbell as first-time coaches of Sean Payton back then. For me, I kind of lean towards the proven commodity.
Yeah,
I'm happy with either one of them.
Right,
We'll be real clear about that.
I agree. Yeah, I think the coordinators are always a kind of a crapshoot. Not that head coach isn't if you hire guys that experience head coaching, but the issue is that there are so many different duties that go into being a head coach versus being a coordinator. I mean, you really manage. You're not as into the weeds with these guys, but you have to manage so many other aspects of the organization. So it's kind of the CEO thing where you can't get in there and be as much hands-on. So again, both guys would be great guys. I mean, I think you got advantages both ways. Now, Glenn's getting a lot of looks from other teams as well. As McCarthy will. He's going to be interviewed with the Bears as well. But one reason being, you mentioned the job he did with Detroit, in particular, the way they shut down the Minnesota Vikings in that last game.
With the injury-riddled defense.
Right, and that kind of carried over into that playoff game, apparently, for the Minnesota Vikings.
Incredibly impressive. Yeah. And again, it seemed more like a mindset and a culture game.
Yeah.
And that's special.
Yeah.
So again, it does remind me of, look, D'Amico Ryans is a little more surreal. I think Aaron Glenn's a little bit more like Dan Campbell, a lot of fire in the belly, and you can see he wears it on his sleeve a little bit.
Yeah.
But again, for me, those two guys are bust. After that, it's what you call a crapshoot. Not saying it can't be done with the guys, with the other guys, but I think the best option we have is those two guys. And Vegas, with the adjusted deal, Vegas has Aaron Glenn, as of today, as the favorite to land the job.
Gotcha. Yeah. What do you think about? I know if he goes to the Bears first, which apparently he will, he's going to interview later this week, and apparently he's talked about talking to the Saints early next week. I guess there's advantages and disadvantages both ways. Usually, you like to be the second guy because he already knows what he has sitting for him in terms of offers. So you kind of have a chance maybe to get him, blocked up there versus when he's the first team he's going with, and he may say, I need to talk to somebody else first.
Sure. Well, I think McCarthy's probably a device of his agent going to say, let me talk to someone else.
Yeah.
I promise the Saints I'd interview with him. Who knows how that goes? You might say, look, I want to be here. I love the offer. Yeah. I don't see any problem with it. I have history with those guys. I promised them that I would interview. Yeah. Let me go interview. Helps all the parties involved. Or you say, well, it's very impressive. It's nothing to sneeze at, but I do have a second interview that I'm going to honor. And you keep them waiting a little bit. And you let your agent try and get a few more bucks and some better terms out of them. And that's how that works, too. That's what an agent's job is.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're the Bears, you might say, hey, we want you, but we're not going to wait. And then at that point, McCarthy's got to make a decision. So
yeah, sure.
See how that plays out.
Yeah. You look at the other guys that have been in the mix in terms of the reports. Kafka, the OC for the Giants. Weaver, defensive coordinator for Miami. Kingsbury from Washington. They have that scheduled interview with him. Of course, he was formerly head coach of Arizona Cardinals. Kellen Moore, who's kind of the coach in waiting at one point in time with the Dallas Cowboys, may still be in the mix there if things don't work out with Dion or whoever they go to. Sometimes it's about those dominoes, which ones fall, to see who's left in the mix, so to speak.
Well, let's look how this plays out. I think, don't discount Dion to Dallas, but if you ask me to put a shiny new dime on it right now, I would say Kellen Moore goes to Dallas.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, Jerry Jones does not want to give up the spotlight and being the face of that franchise, even if it costs him wins.
Yeah.
And we know that. Okay, so let's put Kellen Moore in Dallas. Vrabel's already gone in New England. So you have the Jets, the Bears, and the Saints essentially vying for Aaron Glenn, Mike McCarthy, and then a third guy. Okay. So the worst case scenario for the Saints is Glenn to the Jets, McCarthy to the Bears. That's my opinion. Then you're looking at Joe Brady, Cliff Kingsbury, Kafka, Anthony Weaver, who was very impressive on his interview from everything I'm reading.
Yeah.
And that's the defensive coordinator for Miami, if you're not familiar with him. Young guy, energy guy, and a good defensive coach. He spent a lot of years under John Harbaugh with the Baltimore Ravens. So wouldn't be end of the world if you got him. People are saying, why in the hell are you interviewing Kafka? Because who is Kafka? Who is Kafka? He's the offensive coordinator for the Giants, and they stunk. Their offense was putrid. But he spent a lot of years in Kansas City as an offensive assistant quarterbacks coach when Eric Bieniemy was the offensive coordinator. Story I read today said that Andy Reid was so anxious to showcase Eric Bieniemy having his own offense that he helped him get a job somewhere else in the league.
Right.
Backstory is he did not want Kafka to leave that building. He liked him so much, and he brought him up as quarterbacks coach, and he brought Matt Nagy back as a quarterbacks coach at OC. Kafka got a promotion.
Yeah.
Then he went so they're not to the Giants. So the Saints brass isn't looking at this juggernaut of a Giants offense, which averaged 6 points a game this year or whatever they did.
Almost beat us.
Yeah, right. Should have. And as opposed to what he was and what he knows. They say he is a tough, inner city, hard-nosed kid. He was, if you remember, he quarterbacked Northwestern, so some of their better years.
Yeah.
And then played in the league for a little bit. So the thing on his resume that shines is the reputed toughness that he has, and the fact that he spent so many years under Andy Reid. He's still a young guy, but a lot of years under Andy Reid.
Yeah. Speaking of hard-nosed, tough guy in Northeastern, Rizzi was the interim coach, did an admirable job. I think we were 3 and 4 or so.
From Jersey. You got a guy from Jersey. You got Rizzi
bang.
from Jersey. You know, Bergen Catholic. You went to Catholic
And it
in
was a
Jersey.
good pizza pie, like Mid-City Pizza down there on
Mid-City
Bank Street.
Pizza.
Yeah. But any consideration, typically it is not the right move to bring in an interim coach just because, you're trying to set a different culture and you bring a guy from within. It's kind of the same culture. Although Rizzi had him playing they look like a different team under this guy. But still in all, you're looking for a fresh start. It's typically you're going to go outside the building.
I think we wouldn't stink if Rizzi was the guy at this point. I'm not hoping for that to happen.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that does not happen.
Yeah.
But if he's the best candidate, you have to go with what you feel.
Yeah, right.
And so if all the other guys are gone, you can't make a deal, then that's the guy. And look, I think some of the Jets interviewed like 87 people already for their head coach. And the Saints have a nice little laundry list too, although it's much, much smaller than that.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're interviewing these coordinators who might not really have a shot, like Kafka, like maybe Anthony Weaver, although he's got an outside shot.
Yeah.
Because if you do hire a guy like Rizzi, you want some familiarity where you can help him pick the right guys. I'm sure Rizzi has his list, okay?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But if you get him and he brings in the right coordinators, I think he's got to button up a few things. The outbursts on the sidelines are okay for me after watching Dennis Allen do nothing for 3 years emotionally.
Yeah.
He shows accountability and wears it on his sleeve or demands it. But at the same time, you can't lose your composure to that effect.
Yeah.
So those are some things I think he would need to work on. But they played hard for him. I don't know if they would
did.
have won another game.
It was a different,
I don't know if they would have won another game.
You're right.
Dennis
Yeah.
Allen.
It was a different atmosphere. The team obviously rallied around this guy. We were much more competitive for sure. You look at some of the candidates who are out there. Just circle. I'm not going again to go through all of them. You mentioned the Jets have been 20 interviews or whatever, but typically it's the hot coordinators, right? So you got Todd Monken, who's with Baltimore. You got Aaron Glenn, of course. You got Ben Johnson with the Lions. Spagnuolo with KC. You got Joseph with Denver, defensive coordinator there. Joe Brady, who we mentioned, Bills has some ties here as well. Flores at Minnesota, and Liam Cohen, as you mentioned, with the Bucks is out there. And some of the
sleeper candidate.
Yeah, and some of the recycle guys. The Matt Nagy's in the mix, as you mentioned, a couple. Ron Rivera's been out there doing some interviews. Robert Saleh, who was Leko and the Jets, and of course Pete Carroll's interviewed with one job. I think the Oakland job, or the Vegas
Las Vegas job, and I think he's trying to get an interview with Chicago.
Could be Chicago.
Yeah,
there you go.
Look, let's say Pete Carroll ends up in Vegas. Okay, let's say Kellen Moore goes to Dallas, Aaron Glenn goes to the Jets. I think Ben Johnson is either going to go to Chicago or he's going to end up in Jacksonville, of all things. And the Raiders are now making a play for him. Excuse me, let me say that too. Yeah. Tom Brady really likes him. And Tom Brady is very involved as a minority owner for the Raiders with their coaching search.
Yeah, apparently he was very instrumental in convincing him to take that interview, apparently.
Yeah, and so when the GOAT calls, you got to listen, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, but Liam Cohen is, I think, the guy that I would, if you had to, again, put a couple dollars on it, I would bet Liam Cohen, the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, ends up in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Maybe Ben Johnson, Chicago, or the Raiders. And then so if McCarthy does go to the Bears, then the Saints are sitting there saying, okay, and then you're picking from Joe Brady, Cliff Kingsbury. I like what Kingsbury's done. I'm a big fan of the offensive guy if we don't get Aaron Glenn.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this. It took them 4 downs, and they got nothing out of it twice inside the 10 with Jaden Daniels as your quarterback.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You got to draw me up something better than that. Okay, so he felt, oh man, look how great that.
Yeah, I'd feel better if he was bringing Jaden with him.
If he was bringing Jaden with him, I would feel better. Now I'll tell you this. He's had an athletic, mobile quarterback wherever he's been.
Yeah.
So I think this would be the end of Derek Carr in New Orleans. I think he would ride with Spencer Rattler until he really got his guy. Or if Spencer grows into that with one of the so-called quarterback gurus like Cliff Kingsbury. Joe Brady, real quick. Everything he's touched has turned to gold outside of that Carolina deal. Been very impressive in Buffalo.
Yeah.
But he's had Josh Allen and Joe Burrow when he's had his greatest moments.
Yeah, right.
Burrow in college. Yeah. Wouldn't break my heart, but he's got to bring in a hard ass, a tough guy, to be on his staff. And then like Dan Campbell was with Sean Payton's staff.
Yeah.
And Sean still held everybody accountable, but so a lot of ifs, a lot of moving parts. We'll see where it goes. Very exciting, but I would want McCarthy and Aaron Glenn above all the other names we mentioned.
Yeah, a lot at stake here to get this right. And you mentioned like the culture of the organization. I mean, that's really, we had the continuation model, didn't work out for us. You got to get somebody who's right. That's where you worry about the guys like a Brady. Who is he right in terms of building a culture, not just the X's and O's and the.
And I don't know that he is.
Yeah, you don't know that. So
let me run this by you too. I overheard was at a dinner table with the Saints or dinner party, and the Saints front office guy was there, and someone was kind of asking him information. This is when Allen started out not so great his first year. It was probably October at this point. And he said, well, what's going on? I don't think anybody could hear him, but I was listening, of course. And he said, what's going on with is there a problem with Dennis, or where is Dennis lacking? That, same team from the year before, and they looked totally different, started losing. And the response was, sometimes you got to have that son of a bitch in the building that everybody's a little scared of, and they know they're held accountable to. And that was Sean.
Yeah. Everybody
for everything. The Christmas tree story is well documented by
Everybody's on their toes, yeah.
And Dennis didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I lean towards. You can't keep going back. But the best organizations have a guy in that building that everybody knows is keeping them on their toes and holding them accountable.
Yeah. All right, Kyle, anything else on the coaching searches?
Nope. Just can't wait to see who it is.
Yeah. Let's go over just quickly through some of the playoffs, both college and pros, of course. We'll start with the pros. Not a lot of surprises this weekend. I think most of the seeds won up until I think the Washington pulled the upset. So there were some mismatches here and there. The cream of the crop. I think there's a big drop off between the top three to five teams who we think can win a Super Bowl, and then the next level tier. So I think that's what we saw out over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it almost went chalk, like you said.
Yeah.
Saved the Commanders upsetting the Bucs, and everybody knew that was a possibility. Yeah. I mean, Tampa's coming out of our division. The Saints almost beat them the week before, for crying out loud. So, this is where the rubber really meets the road now. I mean, you have the best teams. You're going to see some serious performances this weekend. And if I had to pick it now, I'd probably say Buffalo and the Lions. Something about the Chiefs just scares me.
Yeah, I got you. Well, the two games that were intriguing, I thought, this weekend were, number one, the Bucs and Washington. What a great game, and what a performance. I mean, Jay and Danny just run out of superlatives. There are people talking the best rookie quarterback performance we've ever seen, and that's not overstated. I think they won the last 5 games, and the last play of the game. That game-winning drive was nothing short of incredible.
Getting away from Kalijah Cansey.
Yeah, and the thing you keep hearing is the word poise. I mean, not just the ability to throw from the pocket, to know when to run, to make these guys miss at this level is just impressive. But the poise, I mean, they got a 4th and a yard or whatever, and first they lined up with Mariota and Daniels in the game, and they trying to draw the defense offside. They called the timeout. He's laughing, jucking it up with the defense.
Saw that.
We didn't get you, So it's almost like he's just having fun out there, and it kind of really. It carries over to the rest of the team when your quarterback's kind of
affects the other team too.
When you're when you're a little bit loose, even though you're a rookie, that has an effect.
There was a story today on NFL Sirius. Pat Curran was talking about in training camp. He was already one of the sharpest guys there. Now look, they're all starting from scratch with this offense, so that's part of it,
Yeah.
But they said during a special teams drill, which required none of the starters, he goes down to the end zone with the offensive line and is conducting this session. He is in charge. There's no coaches down there, and he's going over protections with them and already kind of calling, okay, so you're going to do that. Okay, so if we do this, you'll do this, right? And they said the veteran offensive lineman and the tight end, Zach Ertz, was in the session. So they're sitting there looking at him like, is this for real a rookie?
Yeah.
Now, he had, 5 years of college, whatever, but he has been so enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
And, of course, you have the LSU connection here. But more than that, just a respectful, humble, incredible talent guy who's growing up, getting even better as every game goes by. So okay, we got the other game I was intriguing. I think the Rams in Minnesota, just because there was so much riding here. You had a 14-win team. It looked bad at the Lions, but that's a tough place to play, a tough game in that atmosphere with the division, everything else, and the 1 seed on the line. You kind of can't give them that, but everybody was wondering, was that Darnold's off performance? Is he going to come back and play well? I don't want to throw it all on Darnold last night. The Rams have been much better later in the season, specifically defensively. But it was hard. You mentioned it was hard. How does the team, the 14 wins, play this badly? Badly in the big game.
It was strange to see that, the way they got dominated.
They got destroyed at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, for sure.
The Rams' defensive game plan, and their DC is Don Shula's grandson, Chris Shula.
Yeah.
And just had an array of blitz packages, and in some cases, no pressure, and whatever they were doing to confuse Darnold every play. But he's got to do a better job of not seeing the ghosts, as they say.
Yeah, you're right. When the rush is not there, not starting to get happy feet. The other thing I noticed too is, I looked
He
at.
cost himself a lot of money these last 2
Yeah,
games.
for sure. Yeah, no doubt about it. Whatever contract, whether he stays with Minnesota or moves on. A couple of things. I noticed Dan Orlovsky broke down some film on all the sacks today of the game last night. And really on most of those, Darnold was under heat. There wasn't a lot of options for him. They did a good job of doubling Jefferson most of the game. And the other guys, they just got real physical with him. They couldn't handle the rush. You mentioned, in most cases, they had 6 or 7 guys at the line. Yeah. And they always had somebody backing out and somebody rushing. It just looked like they didn't handle that well from the offensive standpoint. The other piece of this, though, is for both Darnold and for the head coach. They got a 4th and 2 in this game. And he's under pressure right out the bat. And you look down, there's 3 guys running go routes on a 4th and 2. Once they sack you 4 or 5 times, you got to start finding some hot routes and giving these guys.
Get the ball out quickly, even if by design.
Right, either by design plus Darnold, he has to realize, he likes to hold the ball for a while and try to get big plays. But after you get sacked 4 or 5 times, you got to start speeding up the clock. You don't have that time. So I thought both from a play calling standpoint and from a quarterback standpoint, they just missed the boat on that.
For the second time in 2 weeks, but really the first time all year.
Yeah.
And even the games they lost, they were in. Yeah. But yeah, that's a great point you made too. Do something to help him and do something to help yourself.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Start letting the ball out faster. Start calling some plays where they're quick routes. At least get some kind of offensive traction, some momentum. Yeah. But the Rams just were toying with them. And Sean McVay, who didn't see them coming like that.
Well, I tell you,
after he almost resigned,
Colin Cowherd has said, Greg Cosell called him this week before the game, and he was kind of on the fence of who he thought was going to win. He said, this defensive front of the Rams is going to be a problem for this Minnesota offensive line. And so they certainly were. And I went back and looked at all the guys they have in the front 7 for the Rams. They got a couple of second rounds, a third round, a fourth round. They got 1 first round and a linebacker. But again, that's why I always say with the Saints, get you a bunch of mid-level second, third, and fourth draft choices. Trade back, get some depth, be able to build a roster that way and get some really solid guys. And you can get it if you got enough draft choices in those numbers.
And we have a lot of draft choices now, not to make this all about the Saints. Yeah. But defense. And I'm not talking the world's greatest cover corner. Yeah. That would help. Man, front 7 guys, and I'm talking maybe all hands in the dirt guys. Yeah. You cannot have enough good ones because what happens later in the season and then during the playoffs, these games come down just so close, most of these playoff games. You want to gear yourself to where you get your guys in the mix early in the game, your rotation of 7 defensive linemen, and then in the fourth quarter, your bell cows are fresh, and they can go. Yeah. And that's what they need, and that's how you build it through the draft. Yeah. Look, you look at 06, you look at 07. Franchise-changing drafts right off the bat. 06 and 2017. Yeah. And the Saints need that now. Mm-hmm. They need a real difference-making, move-the-needle draft, as in multiple picks, coming up. Yeah. I don't want to hear this Jackson Dart at number 9. Yeah. I don't want to hear about a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, right. Sure. Not another developing guy.
Yeah. Right? You know what? I'll ride with Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler and figure it out until we really get a shot at a great one. Yeah. Going to the Super Bowl next year.
All right, this is Tuesday of the week leading up to the divisional round of the playoffs, and we'll have another show later this week with both talking about college and pro playoffs, and we'll do some predictions. Also, we'll take a look back at the seasons. But I want to mention before we get off the air here, our sponsors, of course, we got Brian Checks on State Farm in Metairie, Causeway Boulevard. We got Mid-City Pizza over on Bank Street.
4400 Bank Street.
We got a little walk-in and drive.
And also on Miro Street, right next to the Frost Stop.
Right across from Tulane Stadium.
Cross Claiborne.
That's
Claiborne Avenue. From Tulane Stadium.
And Luke Eats Uptown.
Corner of Cone and Lower Line. I forgot the address.
Press sandwich.
7329 Cone Street, I believe. Fantastic. We've been going there.
Press sandwiches, salads, coffee drinks.
Paninis, press sandwiches, the best coffee drinks. Open lunch and dinner 6 days a week. I think closed on Mondays, but go get you some.
Okay. Well, we should know something soon on the coaching search and, of course, the ISG Nation and the Italian Sports Guys will be all over it. We are
the Italian Sports Guys.
Bada boom.
Bada bing.